Hey everybody, I'm with the mighty Katie Phang. You know her, you love her. She is an attorney. We used to be the masochists used to go every week to New York Sunday, Saturday mornings eating donuts to talk about current affairs and MSNBC. Then she had her show on MSNBC. Then MSNBC was foolish and just decided to let go of all people of color because that's how you win the children. And Katie then has switched over and moved to Substack, and then she has succeeded and rebounded because she now has her YouTube show. So, folks, you need to subscribe to Katie's YouTube channel. She's the host doing her own thing, and also her Substack where she writes and also shares her content. And she has joined me today yet again. When we talked about a month ago, she had just
God, has
jumped
it
on
been a
Substack.
month? God, has it been that long?
It's been a month, and you had just jumped on Substack. And now, like within one month, you're skyrocketing, as I knew you would. And Katie's here because we want to talk about, well, all of it. But the way we want to talk, what we want to start with is Katie said, Waj, you did this post, and I think we should talk about this post. And the post that I did was, folks, we're not going to give Tucker Carlson his flowers. Tucker Carlson is a piece of shit. However, what Tucker Carlson did this past week, as Donald Trump is gearing up for war, maybe, and now it's 2 weeks, Tucker Carlson asked basic questions of Ted Cruz that nobody asks of Ted Cruz or of anyone
Yeah.
who's pro-war or pro-Israel, right? And he asked simple, basic questions. He asked questions. He asked about facts, and then he did follow-ups, Katie. And he really made Ted Cruz look like a fool because Ted Cruz is all here about being like he has a war boner, doesn't know the basics about Iran, won't answer any questions about APAC, gets humiliated, then says, "Yeah, it's my job as a U.S. lawmaker to protect Israel. It's in the Bible." So he asks, "Where in the Bible?" Can't answer the question. So I give it to you, Katie. Why do you think that exchange was so telling?
Well, I thought, first of all, your posts are always just so spot on. And I haven't heard the phrase war boner, but it actually is pretty spot on as well in this context. But the reason why I sent that to you, Waj, is exactly what you said. And look, I will give the caveat of what I'm about to say and share with everybody who's tuning in and with you that in non-live TV, when it's taped or recorded, you have more time, right?
Yeah.
And so when it's live TV, you only have a short amount of time to be able to speak with or question a guest or an interviewee. But I will say this though, to some extent, when you have the ability to control the edits, the editorial content of what you got going on, something as important as going to war in a potential nuclear conflict, in my humble opinion, I think you give it as much oxygen and space and real estate as you can. And when you have the chance to be able to ask a question of somebody like a sitting United States senator who we know has the ability to bend the ear of the president of the United States, you give it even more real estate. And so the reason why I thought the Tucker Carlson questioning of Ted Cruz was so spectacular was, look, it was a almost classic cross-examination that you would do as a
Yeah.
trial lawyer.
Yes.
He asked leading questions, knowing what the answer was, asked non-leading questions of Ted Cruz. So let me back up for 1 second, Waj. The leading questions are one which usually require a yes or no answer. So instead of saying, you know, how did you walk the dog, which actually makes a presumption that the dog was walked, you would start with, you walk the dog, right? And the answer would be yes or no. You walk the dog with a leash. You walk the dog with the red leash. I mean, so you keep on asking these leading questions that would necessitate a yes or no answer. But then you also ask sometimes non-leading questions. Well, how did you walk the dog? I mean, and so he kind of, as in Tucker Carlson, he switched it up, right? He did some leading, he did some non-leading questions. And the reason why it was so powerful was these were basic freaking facts that you should know about a place that you are going to either try to eliminate off the face of the earth or you're going to go to war against as some type of opponent. It is such a tell that somebody like Ted Cruz didn't even know the fundamentals of the population of Iran. Now, look, would I normally walk around knowing the population of Iran? No. But I bet you, if you had posed the same question to Pete Hegseth, our SecDef, who should know this shit, I bet you he wouldn't know the answer either, Waj. And I think that it just goes beyond incompetence. It just goes to show that we in media need to start doing it this way. I mean, look, Tucker Carlson is a douche canoe too, but Tucker Carlson has done some particularly compelling interviews with people. Doesn't mean that I like the people he's talking to, doesn't mean I necessarily like him as a person, but he does compelling interviews. And I think in this instance, why is mainstream media not doing this with Ted Cruz? Look, Waj, Ted Cruz ain't going to hang out with you and me. First of
Ever.
all, although he's brown and he forgets it, but he ain't hanging out with us.
Yeah.
But look, he'll go on a CNN or an
Yep.
MSNBC. He'll go on a show on mainstream media that he thinks, quote unquote, maybe is big enough or, he can maybe control the narrative or the dialogue. But when he does go on a show like that, right as rain, people should be grilling him like Tucker Carlson did. End of story.
And also
And they're
Lindsey
not.
Graham, right? When he has the war boner and he goes on, or even Democratic establishment. What I've said before, and unfortunately this last week has proven it true. I said a couple of days ago, I actually said last week, Katie, I said, just watch that I have more faith in the America First faction of the GOP, which now includes, as you've seen, these are odious human beings, folks, but you can still give them credit for being on the right side, a broken clock, right?
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, I can't believe I'm saying this, Tucker Carlson, yesterday, Matt Gaetz, Tom Massey, among others, are asking, wait, you were the America First president. You rallied the base to be non-interventionist, right? Why are you sending our country to war for Israel's behalf when Israel could take care of this self? No, no, no. We're asking questions here. And I said, I have more faith in this America First faction of MAGA, keeping us from war than the Democratic establishment. Then we got the Ted Cruz interview. Then we got Steve Bannon and Matt Gaetz piling on and saying, yeah, wait a second, huh? Why are we joining? Then you got Donald Trump saying, okay, ask me in 2 weeks. That's his famous thing. For those people,
Everything's
2 weeks. Everything's 2 weeks.
Taco Trump. Yeah.
And then meanwhile, mouse farts from Chuck Schumer, mouse farts from Hakeem Jeffries, right? And like nothing. And nobody asks the Democratic establishment, like you're right, on corporate media, these people go, right? Lindsey Graham, Hakeem Jeffries, he'll go on CNN, MSNBC. Nobody does basic follow-up questions. And I really like your point because you're right. You are actually, I'm a licensed attorney. I practiced for a few years, but you are actually a successful attorney and a prosecutor. It reminded me that's how the way Tucker was with Ted is how journalists actually should be with politicians, right? They should be made to feel a bit uncomfortable, leading questions, follow ups, having, and you could tell Ted and perhaps all of these individuals have never made to be felt uncomfortable when it comes to this type of unilateral support for Israel, and they can't even answer basic questions. I thought what was even more damning was the whole APAC angle of it, and then also the why do you support Israel? And then he says, "Well, I when I became a U.S. lawmaker, I said, my job is to protect the nation of Israel. It says so right in the Bible." And then he goes,
Oh, yeah. The Bible stuff sent me because they always go to religion. They always want to go because they feel like Jesus Christ will protect them from criticism or protect them from some type of questioning, right? It's almost like, well, God told me I could do it.
"Yeah, but you know what?" Tucker says, "Okay, I am a Christian. I actually
Yeah.
can lean in and ask this question, right?" And, he leans into his Christianity because he's a white Christian man, but then does the prosecutorial follow-ups. And, maybe well, I went to an all-boy Jesuit Catholic school, just because I'm not Christian. I still would have asked him, well, where in Genesis? And what do you mean by the nation of Israel? And is it 1948? Is it 1967? No one does it, but he keeps doing it. And Ted Cruz, folks, if you haven't seen it, couldn't answer these basic questions. And so I'm here in a really strange position where Ted Cruz is a terrible person. Ted Cruz helped mainstream white supremacist conspiracy theories on Fox. And Ted Cruz is the one now who is turning on Fox, and Marjorie Taylor Greene are turning on Fox and calling it propaganda for seniors. I mean, your take on that, Katie?
They ain't lying. I mean, let's be honest, right? They're not lying. It's propaganda. Is it mainly for seniors? Yeah, but look, let's be very fair here. Listen, the viewing audience for MSNBC is also skewed a little bit older too, right? I mean, there is a reason why mainstream media is suffering just on a straight metrics or number standpoint because of exactly what we see. We don't see the pushback. I think any person gets frustrated. If you're like me, you're screaming at the TV. Yeah, but what about this? But
Mm.
wait, don't move on. Don't move on. You know that's a bullshit answer. What?
Yeah.
What? What? And then you get frustrated because the person moves on from the questioning. I think what we're missing is the Trump 1.0 journalists like Jim Acosta, who we know blessedly is now with you and me here on Substack, etc. But the Jim Acostas, the Jorge Ramoses, the people that stood in that press room and said, no, 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 answer the question I asked you. And then they had to be physically manhandled, escorted, had their hard passes pulled, that kind of stuff, Waj. We don't get that. And the limited press corps that is allowed, that's not the far right press corps that's allowed to go into the White House these days. Why is there not more coordination with them, with the major outlets to make sure that if Waj asks a good question that I would ask as a fellow journalist, okay?
Yeah.
If you ask it and KKK Caroline Levitt, bullshit Barbie, doesn't want to answer that question, then I should say, uh, 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 Katie Phang, Katie Phang News Channel. Wash just asked this question. I'm asking the same question. What is the answer? I don't know if it's the competition because there's such little kind of food and crumbs that are being doled out by this White House, but I also think, and again, I speak maybe from the privilege or the convenience of not being in mainstream anymore, but I think that we give the White House too much credibility, Waj, when we
Yeah.
don't do that, right? When mainstream media doesn't say, I'm giving your regime credibility by continuing to show up every day and taking your lies. And then I have the laboring ore of having to distill your lies to my viewers. I'm just not fucking going there. And how about just saying what I like to do on a daily basis with my wait a damn minute? Caroline Levitt stood at the podium yesterday and lied about transgender youth.
Yep.
So
I
I
was gonna
did
ask
a
you about
video
that.
last night. It was more than a minute, but it was so important we decided to do more than a minute. But I said that Caroline Levitt lied because she did not speak in facts and evidence and science and medicine. Why don't we just have that from our media? Why do we have to go and watch Donald Trump put a flagpole up? I don't give a shit. I mean, can I go on the news and say Donald Trump, instead of helping Americans today, he put a flagpole up? Yes. But do I have to go to the White House to be able to report that? The answer is no. Again, I understand that we have a duty as journalists to be able to cover the news, Waj, but what they're giving us is not the news. It's just lies and propaganda.
Yeah, it's and I agree with you. And it's a really good point you made. In the first administration, there was a type of coordinated, if you will, implicit pushback where people used to stand up for their, colleagues, their allies. But now, what Donald Trump has done, it's like that movie, Dark Knight. If you've seen the Joker, right? He has a pointy stick and he throws it and he says, "All right, you guys fight to the death, and whoever survives will be part of my crew." And that's what Donald Trump does, right? He says, "You all fight whoever I like more." He gets to be the winner. He's the winner. You're fired. And he does this with the press, specifically, even in the White House. He goes, "You're fake news. I don't like that question. Who are you, CBS?" Okay. Anyway, I'm not going to go to Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend. Uh, I can't make that up. Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend is in the press corps. Well, for now, he might
Oh,
actually
yeah,
not like
he's
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
gross. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the same one who mocked and ridiculed Zelensky for not wearing a suit, but no such criticism to Kid Rock, who dressed like he was out of a clown car, right? So I do think there's something about competition, and they're replacing us. Literally, Associated Press is being replaced because Associated Press didn't bend the knee to Donald Trump, like removed access from AP, and other people. You're right, should have said, "Hey, no, we're not going to come and cover you." Until you bring AP back, because AP just did its job. AP said it has editorial standards and it's not going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America when it comes to international news, and you're punishing it. So if you want us to carry your water and ask you questions and give you the spotlight that you so crave, you're going to bring AP back. Didn't happen, right? So instead, they're all going along, and I think they're like, okay, Dark Knight. That's the Joker. We don't want to be the next one axed. So we'll choose, we'll pick and choose. Once in a while, maybe we can get him. Maybe we could ask about Taco, which is again a female reporter did it. It's the women and the people of color who asked him about Taco. Trump always chickens out. He got super pissed. But even that one moment of that reporter asking him about Taco, she says, how are you responding to be the Taco meme that's spreading with the Wall Street bros? And he got completely unhinged, right? So it shows you how weak he is, Katie. And it further makes it so infuriating going back to Tucker Carlson. If you just do basic follow-ups, if you just do your job, if you have a modicum of preparation and you just stay on that through line, you don't let it go. And we're lawyers, but you practice as a prosecutor. I took trial practice, right? You know where you want your defendant to go, right? Your witness. You know where your witness to go. You don't let them wiggle out. It's your job as a prosecutor to make sure he or she gives you the answer or non-answer that helps you make your case, right? You stick with them. The lack of the follow-up, Katie, like just explain that to me. Like it's basic journalism 101. And when it happens, Katie, I've noticed when foreign journalists do it, Americans are like, this was amazing. This was the greatest piece of journalism of all time. And Mehdi always jokes because he's originally British. He goes, no, this is pretty much common. This is what happens all around the world, except in America.
Well, I mean, you stole my thunder. I was just going to
Oh,
say
my bad.
there's a reason why there's no. The reason why Mehdi Hassan is always elevated as being the gold standard when it comes to questioning guests or doing interviews is because he is relentless. And being relentless doesn't mean being disrespectful, Watch. Let me be very clear. Being relentless means that you are just pursuing the truth. And regardless what happens, either the guest will answer the question in truth or they'll continue to dodge it. Either way, you get the information you need to give to your viewers, meaning you can then say, look how they dodged answering the question. What does that tell you? It's consciousness of guilt, number one. But number two, it also goes to show they either don't know the answer or they do know the truth and they're not willing to admit it. Either way, the viewer is now more informed. They are a better and higher information American, as I like to call them. That's what we want.
Mhm.
We want to create a new class of what I call higher information or high information Americans. Doesn't have to just be voters, Waj. I like them to vote. But a high information American, in my opinion, is somebody who's back to using their critical thinking skills,
Yep.
has realized that you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism on both sides in terms of what information you're getting. I think that we're seeing a lot of the Republicans catching up to what the Democrats have been doing a little too well, which is the Democrats are very easy to self-criticize. The circular firing squad is kind of a Democrat specialty. I think the
Yeah.
Republicans are figuring out that it is okay to disagree with people within the party, even though they have done a spectacular job of circling the wagons when it counts. And that's something that I do think the Democrats need to take a page out of the GOP playbook from. But when it comes to being able to say, like you just did, why is it crickets from Chuck Schumer right now?
Yeah.
And let me be clear. And if I missed it, I will humbly accept the correction. But after Scrimeti came out yesterday in the Supreme Court, I don't think Chuck Schumer was screaming in the rafters about what a terrible decision it was.
Nope.
And, he's the Senate freaking minority leader for the Democrats, right? Like he should be leading the charge on the messaging of outrage and what the action plan is to be able to fight back on these critical issues. But I'm hearing no guidance from the Democrats, especially when it comes to a potential nuclear conflict. One that I think Trump had no fucking idea was going on. Meaning, I don't think
Like,
Bibi Netanyahu clued him into shit because I feel like this all went down and Trump's like, oh, damn. Well, now I got to figure out how to react to what's happening and what can I do to make myself look like I have my big boy pants on today. And that's what I think is happening right now. So the fact that we get somebody like Ted Cruz, who's being challenged by another person who has cult-like status, Tucker Carlson. Again, Tucker Carlson did what all journalists should be doing. So my hat off to him briefly for pressing Ted Cruz, because as an American, I don't want to go to war.
Yeah, this is war, folks. This is war. This is not a game. This is not a joke. We're talking about Iran, a country of 90 million people. Donald Trump just casually a couple of days ago said, everyone in Tehran evacuate. Tehran is a city of 17 million people. There are human beings there, right? And the Islamophobia and the dehumanization of brown lives is so constant that, you could pray for Israel. Lindsey Graham prays for Israel. Mike Huckabee prays for Israel. Ted Cruz prays for Israel. I would have asked this question. Why not pray for Iran? What have the Iranian people done? This was a unilateral strike, right? No one even asked that basic question, which allows you
But you
to
can't,
dehumanize
but
people.
Waj, you can't do that, because if Trump does that or anybody does that, then Trump can't build Trump Gaza. Remember, you can't do anything that looks like you're sympathetic to somebody who's perceived to be an enemy of Israel, right? So if that happens, you're not going to be able to build your Trump Gaza on the Gaza Strip. I mean, but again, and that's not a joke, by the way, people. I'm dead serious about that. So I just think, look, one of the bigger takeaways too is, my friend, I also think that, and I've been talking about this a lot on my Katie Phang News channel, we need to be more dialed in also for international news. That's the other
Oh yeah.
criticism of mainstream media. Mainstream media does a shitty job of only focusing on domestic news. And it is so arrogant to think that we are living on some island by ourselves and that the international affairs don't have something to do with us other than just tourism, tariffs, right? I mean, yeah, that stuff is important, but there's a kind of the global politics out there that we ignore in mainstream media in America. And I find that to be offensive, because we could do less coverage of the Trump stupidity and more coverage of the international stuff going on. And then I think, again, we get a high information American.
But like you said, high information American and quality, and this is what we've tried to do, and especially people like us, people look like me, the brown skin folks, especially war on terror. What we say is this impacts communities both at home and abroad. And the starting point isn't the latest catastrophe. You have to give it context, right? And if you give the viewer, the American viewer, the context, if you spend going back full circle, like you mentioned, a little bit of time, not even that much, just 5 minutes of time. And you say, okay, this did not start on October 7th, right? There is an occupation. There are settlements, right? This is how Hamas came to power, right? This is why Gaza is blockaded. This is why people can't escape, right? This is why people are upset. Then people go, oh, I get it now. I have the big picture. And then they start asking questions. Well, why are we funding Israel? Oh, Israel is a nuclear power? I didn't know that. How come nobody told me? Oh, okay. The Iranian people dislike the leadership. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought the Iranians were all the same, axis of evil, right? Oh, the Iranian Revolution happened after the people did an uprising against the completely corrupt Shah that was put in place by Western powers because they helped overthrow Mossadegh, the president of Iran who wanted to nationalize the oil. I get it. Now I understand why the Iranians were so pissed off against America. They just don't hate freedoms. This makes sense. And then you get context, and if people had that context, Katie, you could have literally perhaps avoided the disastrous war on terror. You could have avoided this catastrophic Middle Eastern policy where all the worst people who have engineered it and have been the architects of it, Katie, have kept failing up. Folks, they've been wrong for 30 years. And now, after being wrong, they literally want to drag us into another war where there will be wrong again and people will die. So I completely agree with you, but I still go back to it is the media's responsibility and job to fill in those missing gaps for the American viewer that already, by virtue of our United States of amnesia, by virtue of us being a superpower, by virtue of us thinking the whole world revolves around us, does not even know like who the vice president is, all the states, and like let alone geography and also what's happening in the Middle East. But if you gave them that type of information with the basic follow-ups, spending a little time, people say, yeah, good point. Why are we rushing to war? I give it to you. Sorry for my rant.
No, listen, and everything you say is well taken, which is why when it comes to something like what's happening with Gaza, right, in Israel, I am so careful, because there is so much history there about which I am ignorant. There is so much history there about which I am still continuing to learn. And context is always key. Context is key. But then I think about the collateral damage or the collateral effects, Waj, and I'm going to bring one very home to us, because regardless of what you think about what has happened with Israel and Gaza, the Palestinians, etc., I actually have two quick points. One, the GOP has successfully taken away the ability for us as Democrats, and we need to get it back when it comes to the narrative, when it comes to things like, I don't know, I am not a sympathist for terrorists. So because I take a position that may be sympathetic to people that are being bombed, that means that I'm a pro-Hamas terrorist sympathist? No. Okay. Another thing that they've done is when it comes to the context of immigration, because I'm fighting for due process, that also means that I'm a gang lover or that I am a Venezuelan gang lover, terrorist lover. No, we're not that. We're just fans of due process, right? Which brings me to my second point. The reason why we should care about what's happening internationally is because Donald Trump has used that to justify his quote campaign of anti Semitism, right? Or his campaign to combat anti Semitism. And he's using that to justify his immigration moves, guys.
Right.
If you look at his executive orders, if you look at the stuff that they're doing right now, putting aside the rounding up of mainly Hispanics and others right now, remember everything that's happening to Harvard, Columbia, all these places, right? And even people being deported and kidnapped and everything, they're doing it under the banner of, well, we're combating anti-Semitism. And what is that code for, or very obvious language? It's because we think that you write an op-ed that seems to be, quote, pro-Palestinian, that means that we can deport your ass. That is why we need to be educated about what's happening in the Middle East so that we understand what are the issues that are at play here. But I do think that because there's so much information, we start to compartmentalize our data intake. And I think that it's up to the media to synthesize it in a way that people can understand it, they can digest it, and then they can share it in their communities. And then again, we have more information and we're smarter for it.
Well, I mean, exactly what you just said is something that should have been repeated by corporate media is that a majority of Jews realize that Donald Trump is using and abusing anti-Semitism and specifically Jews as a sword against our free press, against immigrants, against universities. And they realize because of their own marginalized history that whenever that happens, it's bad for Jews. So they've been the ones saying, no, no, this is the most anti-Semitic administration in history that does not care about Jews whatsoever and is now using anti-Semitism as a divide and conquer, right, method to go after universities, to go after professors, to go after students, to go after immigrants that they don't like. They don't care about Jews at all. In fact, proof that they don't care about Jews at all is if they cared about Jews and anti-Semitism, why would Donald Trump promote the anti-Semitic replacement theory that has radicalized terrorists to commit violence? Why did he sit with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West, Kanye post anti-Semite West, right, for a dinner, and to this day has never apologized for it. And there's no follow-up questions. There's no one who asks him about his anti-Semitic record. Like, folks, if I've tried to keep the receipts. Mehdi's tried to keep the receipts. A few of us have tried to do it. Donald Trump and the Republican Party and the modern MAGA movement openly, folks, openly supporting and promoting white supremacist Nazi conspiracy theories. I said that without any exaggeration. The replacement theory, Haitians eating dogs and pets, right? The South African white genocide theory. These are all literally created and promoted by white supremacists and Nazis. He dined with Nick Fuentes. At the time, Nick Fuentes was openly known as one of the leaders of the young white nationalist
100%.
anti-Semites, right? This is a guy who said, Hitler was based. This is a guy who's made jokes about the Holocaust, right? Holocaust denialism. Donald Trump had dinner with him and Kanye West, and to this day, no one ever asks him why. He keeps talking about, dual loyalty, says to American Jews, I've done so much for you, your country, Israel. They're like, what are you talking about, right? I don't need Jewish money, right? Remember the first administration where you had the Star of David next to Hillary Clinton, and then they removed, like, folks, this goes back 10 years. So how come no one in corporate media puts that in context and says, when Donald Trump talks about, fighting anti-Semitism, Donald Trump, how can you talk about fighting anti-Semitism when American Jews and Jewish leaders have accused you of being anti-Semitic? And do you, sir, finally condemn Nick Fuentes and regret dining with him? I would just love anybody to ask him that question. Do you condemn dining with Nick Fuentes? And Katie, they just leave this. They leave this and no one touches it. Sorry for my rant. You got me going.
No, and then Pete Hegseth, he thank gosh the female Democratic senators were grilling him about him elevating a known anti-Semite as well to a higher position in the the Department of Defense. I mean, look, the, somebody posted in the comments, and I apologize, I didn't give the attribution because it went by so fast. But here's the thing: 5 minutes of perspective could be 5 minutes of question and answer. Meaning, like when I have a guest on, when I had my show on MSNBC, some people very kindly and very complimentary were like, Katie, we'd like to hear more about your independent thoughts about stuff, right? Because I used to do my Katie's, sidebars and all this other stuff, whatever.
Oh, those are
But
great.
Waj, but but Waj, for me though, I said, I'm not, but I'm not the expert, right? Like, I'm not the person who knows the most about this. You don't need to be hearing from me. I want to elevate this person's voice so they have a platform that has a national reach, if not larger, so that they can educate the people that are tuning in. And so for me, it was more important to have the viewers not hear from me. I mean, you knew what my opinion was, let me be clear, but it was less important for them to hear from me, Waj. It was more important for them to hear from the guest, which is why
Mm.
if you're thoughtful about who you bring on, when you're thoughtful about not having the same talking heads all the time and the same pundits all the time, it lends to a varied and healthier perspective. But for example, you know, one time post October 7th, I had a female journalist from Jerusalem on from Israel, and I had her on so she could explain the corruption and bribery trials that Bibi Netanyahu and his wife are going through, because people needed to understand that the timing of October 7th was so beneficial to Bibi Netanyahu, right? And that people needed to understand the acts that he had done to overturn and anti-democratize the Supreme Court in Israel. Again, context is key. History is important. And that is why the more that we do in media to be able to just provide the information, you don't have to have it filtered through my opinion all the time. Just take the information for what it is, and either you honor it for the truth or you don't. And if you don't, then what I'm saying, even if it's skewed with my opinion, Watch, you're not going to give a shit what I'm saying. You're
And your
not.
job as the host and the moderator is also to, I mean, folks, the way this works, and if we are skilled at what we do, the host and the moderator, obviously, their opinion more often than not now, but the host and the moderator, much like a lawyer. And again, I think that legal background that you and I have, that legal training and the storytelling training actually kind of helps, is we use the witnesses to help us create a story for the jury or oftentimes for the judge, right? Because oftentimes people don't realize it isn't like Few Good Men. As a lawyer, you're writing briefs most of the time, but nonetheless, you're a storyteller. I always told folks this, right? I started off as a playwright, then I became a lawyer, then, I did nonfiction. It's all stories, right? And you have a protagonist, and they have an obstacle, and they have to get to a goal, and there is an antagonist, and you have to, like, human beings, folks, are creatures not just of intellect, but also the heart. So you get to, like, stir up the emotions, and you have to make a convincing case, and you have to use all the tools at your disposal. And a witness can be the most convincing tool at your disposal, and you lead them and you use them to thread and connect the dots. You use them to tell a story, right? And so a host and a moderator, sometimes that's what they do. It's like, I'm going to use you, the expert, who also has credibility, to come on my show, and I will give you just enough that you now connect the dots for my audience, right? And what I have seen with the BB, I think it's very relevant, right? Because if people knew that Netanyahu, people still don't know this. Why is Netanyahu so committed to war? Because Netanyahu, much like Trump, realizes the second the war ends, the person who will most likely be held accountable and go to jail for the rest of his life is Benjamin Netanyahu. Has corruption cases against him. So he wants war. He wants perpetual war for the rest of his life, right? So that's important context. Oh, we have a corrupt man dragging America to, oh, thank you for bringing that clip from 30 years ago where Netanyahu has had a war boner for 3 decades and has been wrong about Iran all of a sudden getting nuclear weapon. Oh, thank you. That one reporter who asked, a good reporter, right, folks, just a couple of days ago, that reporter said, Donald Trump, didn't your own director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, 90 days ago said that Iran is not close to a nuclear weapon? You know what Trump said? And they got him on camera, which made it more damning. I don't care what she says. Just a simple, basic questions like that, folks. And speaking about the storytelling, and you mentioned this, and I want to ask you this.
Yeah, but watch, like, why not? Then why not the follow up of, but wait, she's your pick for DNI.
Yeah, they
Putting
did.
aside the fact that she's a
They left.
Russian asset, right? But she's your pick for DNI. What do you mean you don't care what she has to say? You know better than your DNI pick? I mean, but nobody says that to him, right?
Nobody
It
asked
just lets
that.
it just sits like the bad fart in the room, and then like people just move on.
And it permeates, right? Exactly. Oh, look, the bar is so low that I'll give that credit, but Katie's absolutely right. If we live in a perfect world, someone would say, the last reporter just gave you a quote from your own DNI, Tulsi Gabbard. Why do you not care what your own director of national intelligence says? Man, I have better intelligence there. Third reporter would say, how do you have better intelligence than your DNI? Are you not getting the same information? Who are the sources? I get stuff that she doesn't get. What do you mean? What does she? Can you
But
imagine
he
that
has.
through line?
But here's the thing: like April Ryan was on with me and Jen Rubin yesterday. Waj on the Contrarian. We did coffee with the Contrarian. April, who's still dispatched to the White House, said he's not even taking intel briefings anymore.
Oh, only 14. He's only done 14, which is the lowest of any
So,
president in history. And
so
speaking
somebody
about
should
Tulsi
be like,
Gabbard,
yeah, so somebody should say to him, okay, but you don't even take the intel briefings, President. So how are you going to know better than your DNI?
and also, folks, just to bring up another thing, there was reports 2 weeks ago that your DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, and your own National Security Council is so frustrated and worried that you don't take your security briefings that she is trying to make Fox News video style security briefings for you to watch. By the way, folks, that story lasted only for a day. Our president, the commander in chief, could potentially lead us to World War III, is so lazy that he not only doesn't take the security briefings, folks, that his DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, the fact that I even said that is shocking because she should not be the DNI, is so worried that she's like, how can I edit the security briefings into Fox News style clips so this dumbass can watch it? And it was gone from the news. You mentioned something. I want to ask you this question because I think it's important. I know you care about it as well. Speaking about connecting the dots and telling the story, let me share your personal story before I give it to you because I know you have a lot to talk about this. Republicans have spent $250 million on the anti-trans boogeyman.
Yeah.
They attacked CRT. They attacked right here in Virginia. It started 4 years ago. I tried to warn people. I tried to warn the Democrats. I wrote a piece on it. I said what they did to Muslims, what they did about Sharia law, what they did about undocumented, they're doing against the transgender people. You guys aren't focusing on this. Suburban parents are going to freak out. They just walk through it, right? Youngkin used it, won. They started using Virginia as a test case. They went nationwide. They spent $215 million, folks, on anti-transgender messaging to the point where I watch football. During football, the only ad was Donald Trump is for us, Kamala is for they, them. Fast forward, the first thing that the Trump administration does is attack transgender people. And for the past 5 months, they've been erasing transgender people. All right. I went to Katie, the Bay Area about 2 months ago. I went to some fundraiser, right? Wealthy, upper middle class, a lot of brown folks, a lot of Muslim. Some of these people did not vote for Kamala Harris. They didn't vote for anyone. Some of these people voted for Jill
Mm.
Stein. Some of these people voted for Donald Trump. I spent 5 minutes connecting the dots and I asked them why. I thought it'd be Gaza. Gaza was number two. You know what the first reason they voted for Trump was?
Stands.
The gays. So I always call it the gays in Gaza. I was right. And these otherwise intelligent people, they're making our kids gay. And I said, is your kid gay? No. Is your daughter gay? No. Is your spouse down low gay? No. When was the last time you met a transgender person? I don't know. When was the last time a transgender person did anything to you? I don't know. But they're coming after our kids. I spent 5 minutes breaking down how it's bullshit, how they're 1% of the population, how they're the most marginalized community on earth, and how Donald Trump preyed on gay panic and gay fear just like he preyed on anti-Muslim fear. That same person, within 5 minutes, Katie said, oh, they got me. Oh, well, now what do we do? And I realized, Katie, it only took 5 minutes of context and connecting the dots. And I feel like there has been a failure in corporate media, especially New York Times. And there's a through line which leads to yesterday's Supreme Court decision. I yield the floor to you.
You're not wrong. I mean, I actually appreciate because when you asked the rhetorical question, I said the trans issue, but you're right to actually frame it as the gay issue because even though they're separate and distinct issues, I do think it all gets subsumed into just one big boogeyman, right? I feel like it all kind of gets labeled as being some, perversion of values or perversion of something of society. And that's what the Republicans have done effectively is that I think this dovetails, Waj, a lot with what we've been talking about a few minutes ago, which is the ineffectiveness of the Democrats to kind of clean things up and explain that we are not pro Hamas, we're not pro terrorists, we are not pro gang, we are not pro, quote, making your kids gay. Somebody asked me yesterday, I think it was former Senator John Tester. I was on his podcast with Maritza Giorgio, and he said that the Democrats suffer from the inability to answer a direct question concisely with, what do you stand for? And I said, that's an easy one. We stand for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's it. Because that's what we stand for. I think we are like the dog chasing its tail. We're so reactive as Democrats. You say something and we're doing it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't counter it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't fight back on it. But I do feel like we sound defensive. I do feel like we are not on the offensive enough, which is why for me, and we talked about this when I was on your show a month ago, the ability to not be sidelined during a time when there's so much critical shit going on is the reason why I chose to leave that contract at
Yeah.
MSNBC. Because I could not sit and to feel stifled from being able to express what I think needs to be the requisite level of anger and outrage and urgency to start cleaning this up. I was frustrated that I could not clean this up in the way and the manner within which I wanted to do it. So we need to be connecting the dots for the people. We need to be also meeting them where they are, meaning it's not going to be on mainstream, right? It's going to be at places like this. It's going to be on YouTube. The luxury I get is I did a video a couple of weeks ago about the South Korean presidential elections because they were being done out of turn. And the
Yep.
reason I did the video is because far right South Koreans were coming into the United States sphere and going on Steve Bannon's podcast and others and saying, stop the steal. They were election deniers. They were promoting lies about election fraud in South Korea. And I was like, look, people, these are not unique to the United States. These are things that are infiltrating democratic regimes across the world. And then they had their presidential elections, and knock on wood, the Democratic candidate won, right? But look, did that video do as well as some of the other stuff? No. Did I give a shit? No. Because one, I'm South Korean, but two, again, it was important for people to understand that there is a whole world of information out there that you may find to be interesting, but more importantly, I know has a relevancy to what you are going through here in the United States. So that's what we need to be embracing. We need to be able to connect the dots for people in our own ways, Waj. And if it means doing more of these, if it means going out and doing a town hall across the country, whatever it is, that's what we need to be doing. But you know what? I wasn't elected to Congress. I'm not sitting in DC. I wasn't elected to Congress. So why is the connect the dots not happening more from DC? That's what I
Yeah.
don't get.
No, same. And I don't want to keep you that long. I want to ask you one final question about connecting the dots. But when it comes to transgender rights, the reason why people say, I talked to Danielle Moody about this yesterday, my co-host, and we're going to be live at 12 p.m., folks, for Democracy Ish. Join us on YouTube. But I said, look, I'm a practicing Muslim man. I believe in God. I live a very traditional life, even though my politics have always been progressive. And a lot of people said, why are you talking about this gay stuff, Waj? You're a Muslim. You should know better. I get a lot of heat from my own communities, and I say what you all don't realize is first they'll come after transgender, but the transgender community is a Trojan horse for everyone else, right? They'll use transgender communities and then they'll move to undocumented, then they'll move to legal immigrants. And by the way, folks, it was Senator Padilla getting dragged and handcuffed last week. Him being a senator didn't protect him. Brad Lander being a New York City comptroller didn't protect him, right? You being a Tufts University grad student, Rameza Ostrich, who had the crime of co-running an op-ed, that didn't protect her, right? You going to Columbia University, one of the best universities in the world, that won't protect you, right? You being a citizen who happens to be a pregnant woman, 9-month pregnant woman, was arrested and terrorized by ICE in LA because they don't give a shit. They see me, Katie, anyone, they're like enemy, right? To Stephen Miller, who is basically the shadow president, all of us are the enemies because he wants to make America white again. So I said it is in our interest as Americans to stand up for a Katie, to stand up for a 9 month pregnant woman, to stand up for a transgender a person, because we're all in this, folks. Fascists come for everybody, right? We all have skin in the game. And with that, to connect the dots, I want to ask you this final question, because you and me, and you've talked about this, you know, we're children of immigrants, and we are the recipients of our parents' sacrifice. My father came here post 1965, the Immigration and Nationality Act, which removed the restrictive quotas that were put in place for 40 years against Asians, folks. 1920s, you had another America First movement. It's always been the same, and they just blocked immigration, and they discriminated on national origin. And thanks to the civil rights movement and the sacrifices of Black folks and their white allies on the backs of the civil rights movement, Lyndon B. Johnson and the Democrats, who weren't the most woke, were like, fine, we'll lift this friggin' quota because we can't sit there and talk about civil. This is how it happened, folks. We can't sit there and talk about civil rights and then also discriminating against all the Asians. 1965 Immigration Nationality Act passes. My dad comes. I think your dad and those generations come, right? We get to be born in America as American citizens. And now we're alive to witness this. I know you loved your father. I always look forward to your father's posts. They're very emotional. Happy Father's Day to your father. And your family to Father's Day a few weeks. So my father's also old. And, you and I talk, I read your posts and I empathize because my father, thankfully, is still alive. And he talks about the America that was and the America that's becoming. Right. And so I wanted to connect the dots. I want to ask you this final question. As a daughter of immigrants, and you're proud of your South Korean heritage, I'm proud of my Pakistani heritage. The context that's missing when it comes to this attack on undocumented immigrants, this attack on immigrants, and the fact that Democrats in the beginning of this administration, folks, I try to bring the receipts. Katie and I try to be fair. The Lake and Riley Act would not have passed without support of House Democrats and Senate Democrats that terrorizes undocumented immigrants purely for having a non-criminal charge, right? Let's be honest. And because a lot of Democrats realized they were weak on the polling when it comes to immigrants, they kept quiet. And it was one senator, Senator Van Hollen, only one, who went to El Salvador and said, I'm not going to leave until I get proof of life of Abrego Garcia, because he went there and he forced it to be in the news, folks. Media covered it for a week. And as a result of that story getting mainstream coverage, Abrego Garcia is negative 20 albatross on Donald Trump and Republicans. So that's me connecting the dots. I yield the floor to you, Katie.
Why is it just one lone man doing that? I mean, and then why is there not more of a conversation about that totally rigged bullshit indictment against Kilmar Abrego Garcia, where it's like, we can't bring him back, hands up in the air. Oh, but psych, we can bring him back and do some trumped up bullshit indictment so that we can, quote unquote, then legally deport him once he's, faced his criminal charges. I mean, we can, I like to say, Waj, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We are all collectively capable as Americans that care. We can do it. We should be doing it. I jokingly said on that podcast yesterday with John Tester, I said, we could benefit from a new media network that has one dedicated person that covers just this immigration beat or just the justice beat or whatever, which is kind of what they do, I think, in regular kind of publications like maybe the New York Times or whatever. But that is just the constant 24-hour streaming of information based upon those particular areas, because I do think we steal from Peter to feed Paul when it comes to coverage. I do think we remain reactive to the flashpoints of what's happening on a daily basis, but I do think we just kind of neglect to stay on stories, which I think ironically gets us back to the very beginning of our conversation today, which is, where's the follow-up?
Yep.
Where's the dogged, relentless pursuit of the answer that ironically Tucker Carlson did with Ted Cruz?
Katie, I kept you way longer than I thought I would. Before you leave, please shamelessly promote yourself to the 1,600 people who have tuned in for your brilliance.
This is always so hard to do. Please, people, if you haven't, go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's free. It's Katie Phang News. I'm doing it in partnership with the great guys over at the Midas Network. It's been a fantastic partnership. It's been about a month, a little bit less than a month we've been doing it, just trying to push out as much content as I can. And then I once and always Substack is my home, and I'd
What's
love
the
for
name
your
of the Substack?
support. It's just at Katie Phang, but I also have it's really Law and Disorder is what it's called. And I'd appreciate any and all support you can do. Subscribe. If you can be a paid subscriber, I'd appreciate that as well. But in the meantime, I'm just grateful for the community, the ability to hang out with you, Waj, and to hang out with everybody else who's tuning in. It's a valuable part, for my soul. Makes me feel good to spend this time with all of you because it makes me feel like those conversations I'm having in my head on a daily basis, that there's people out there that feel the same way.
And go right now to YouTube, click the bell on the Katie Phang Show. It's free. And the way it works, folks, is the YouTube elves that work the algorithm. The more subscribers you get, the more outreach, that Katie Show has, the more they promote it, the more she'll be able to get some money from it and perhaps feed herself and her children. And then also with Substack, she, like me, has two tiers, right? You could be free, but also paid. If you have a couple of bucks, become a paid subscriber. Folks, this has been The Left Hook. I started this a year ago. My mom reminded me last week. It was like last
Happy anniversary.
yeah, last Friday was my year anniversary. I just jumped in. I thought, Katie, if I could get 10,000 subscribers, I'd be happy. But we're at, I'm a one person operation. I got like 800 kids, but we have now like 72 or 73,000 subscribers. Like a fool, I've kept everything for free without any paywalls because germane to this conversation, I know there's 1,600, almost 1,700 people who've tuned in. For those who tuned in late, don't worry, we're going to have it up and I'm gonna have it. And I'm gonna share it with Katie so she can have it up as well. We're gonna have transcripts. I strongly recommend listening to Katie dropping dimes, and she also dropped a 1980s Psych, which made me very happy as an aging millennial. But we believe citizens and people should be informed because democracy, I heard, dies in darkness. So if you can become a subscriber, if you have a couple of bucks, hey. I'm like Blanche Dubois. It depends on the kindness of strangers, but if you can, I get it. Spread the good word. Please support Katie Phang. She did fantastic work. I saw her rise. I knew her when she went from attorney to commentator to co-host to host, and now you know her, love her, and she's doing her own thing, unfiltered, unleashed. Doing her own thing, which makes me so happy. So, folks, that's Katie Phang Show. That's The Left Hook. Until next time, be kind, be decent, be empathetic, take care of yourselves, and please, oh, please don't be a fascist. Katie, thanks so much.
Bye, guys. Take care.
Bye.